Hi, so in this video I want to continue just looking at some elementary parts of Dolt databases, so we're familiar with the way the data in these databases is laid out. And so in this video I want to show you how views work. Views are a really important idea in databases, where the idea is you have the data filtered or sorted and displayed in a particular way, and you want to save that display. You can think of it as a report as well too. So when you're dealing with data in databases, you have various tables, and the tables are related to each other in various ways. And so if you put the data together from different tables in order to display it according to some criteria, oftentimes the idea behind that is kind of like a report. You have a report that you want to run on the data every day and show the results of that report. So the SQL language or idea for that is called a view. And so for a view in a database, the views are stored in the database as well too. Just like the tables. And in fact, one way to kind of think of a view is it's a kind of a virtual table in a way. Because if you look at the views, here they are. There's two in this database. This is the coffee shop database that we looked at last time. There's one called completed. And so if we run this one, it's run here already. I click this little button for running it. If I click this button to run it, it shows the result of that. And as you can see, it does kind of look like a table, but it's a limited table or a filtered table. And what's happened here is it's the completed orders. So if you remember, go back to the orders table. Here's the orders table with all the orders in it. Some of the orders are completed and some not. And so if I run the view over here that's related to completed orders, I'm going to see just the completed ones there. And then down here there's a view for in progress, and if I run that one, I see that it's the ones that are not completed, so that's called in progress. And so these are the orders that are in progress. There's another thing that's happening too. If I go back to the tables and I look at the orders, I see that there's this product ID here, and when I look at those views, it's sort of nicely put in the product name there instead of that product ID. So there's definitely some interesting stuff happening when you create these views. And in fact, once the views are set up and stored in the database, you can go to this little show definition part, and it will show actually the query behind what created that display of the data. So this is what's called an SQL query. And an SQL query is just some code that runs that organizes the data and gets a particular result or display for you. So we'll talk about this a little bit later on when we work with the LLM. We're going to have it explain these views to us and how they're created. But you can also click on this other one, in progress, and there's the SQL code that created the in progress view. And basically what these are is it's something that looks at that completed field to see is it equal to 1 or is it equal to 0. If it's equal to 1, then the order is completed. But if this is completed field is equal to 0, then we're going to call that as in progress. And then it also organizes the columns in a particular way as well too. So we'll talk about the structure of these when we work with the LLM, with the MCP that allows us to understand the Dolt databases. So the last thing I want to talk about before we go back to working with the LLMs is, and for Dolt databases, is this idea of a schema over here. Every table, if you click on it, has something that's called a schema that shows the different fields that are in that table. So if you click over here on schemas, you'll see one for each table. So remember, we have the two tables, orders and products, but if you go over here and click on schemas, it shows two of them. And if you run this first one, what it does is it shows you the code for the create table statement that created the table. And if you look at this carefully enough, you'll see it gives the fields here. Basically, it's a list of the fields, and it lists whatever additional information related to the various keys there is in this table as well. To remember, we said the primary key was the order ID, and then there was a foreign key that was there as well too. And so this is the code that created the table in the database, and this is sometimes called a schema. So it's often the case that if you're working with a database, to ask questions about the schema for the different tables, and when you ask about the schema for a table, you're asking to take a look at this statement right here. So you can see that the order ID and the product ID are there. Here's the rest of the columns. And you also specify the data type they are as well too. This customer name is text or string, and the quantity here is an integer, whole number basically. So you specify the field names and then also the data types when you looking at a schema for a table. And if we look at the other one, the products one, it's very similar. There's something about a primary key there, and then the various fields have data types that go with them as well too. And so this is the statement that created the products table in this database. So for example, if you were going to create a new table, it would have to have a statement like this as well too, if you're going to add a table to this database. So in terms of the database, you can always the Dolt databases, you can always click on where the database is stored, and you can see all the data in it, just like we're looking at here. If you're displaying this data in various ways, you can come over here and download the data, or these display right here as a CSV file or an Excel file. So if you want to import or export the data, there's various ways to do that. If you want to create new views, you can do that. There's a part up here to do that. And there's various other parts here in this database site. And the whole site is called DoltHub. And in DoltHub are various open source databases. And the ones that we're going to use are the ones that are created by me. And so we will see these kind of strings like this. This first part right here is who owns the database. This second part right here is the name of the database. And then oftentimes when you're working with the Dolt database, there's also the idea of a branch of it as well too. So you have the owner right here and the part of this name, and then you'll have the name of the database here. And so that's two really important parts of specifying a Dolt database. You say the user that created it and the name of the database. And usually it's the user, and whoever the user has set up to be collaborators are the ones that can write to the database. So most of the databases that you'll be working with, you won't be able to write to them, but you will be able to view them and sift through the data and kind of organize it and display it in various ways. So for the most part, when we deal with analyzing a database with a language model a little bit later, we won't be writing to the database. We'll just be kind of viewing it. So these are all the different databases that are under my username, and this will be the name of the database. Here it lists the tables that are in it. And what's not mentioned here is the branch, but if you go back to this database that we're looking at here, the branch for the database is indicated down here, right here. This is the main branch for the database, and then this particular database has a bunch of branches down here. And the way branches work is you usually are interested in the main branch of your database, but if you're going to make changes to it, you might switch over to another branch, and another branch would be a copy of the database that then has kind of a different life after you make the copy or create the branch. And the idea behind branching it would be that you make your changes on a branch and then you merge it back to the main branch when you're happy with those. So it's kind of a way of working with a version of your database that's meant to be experimental. And then when you experiment with that new version, that new branch, and you're happy with it, and you're ready to roll it over into production, you can merge it back to the main branch. And so this is the way a lot of software development works as well too. You work with version control copies of your documents, and the website that for that is called GitHub, and so DoltHub is kind of a version or a play on that idea where you're using branches to work on databases as well. So the branching idea is, I think, one of the features about Dolt that makes it really well suited for working with language models, because language models can very easily mess up your data. And so if you're able to branch your database and work with the large language model on a branch, you can always kind of throw that branch away and you don't have to worry about it. It's kind of a very, it's a very useful idea for backing up your work as you're kind of doing it. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on when we talk about the business management database.